Nobody's immune to nagging. I'm a member of the Writers Alliance of Gainesville, and on January 27th at the Hilton Hotel, we're having our annual Sunshine State Book Festival. There will be about 200 authors from all over the state and out of state, and it's free to whoever wants to go to it. So you're welcome to come, and also there'll be a keynote speaker on Saturday, Jack Davis, who won a Pulitzer Prize for his book on the history of the Gulf of Mexico, and we'll be giving away free books either every 30 minutes or every hour, I'm not sure which, but it's totally free for y'all to come. So if you'd like to meet some authors, they will have books for sale too.
Okay, it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker today. Greg Smith is a certified financial planner, beginning his career in this field in 2008. He was originally from West Palm Beach, but he's lived in Newberry since 1995. He graduated from Newberry High School, where he was on the varsity weightlifting and football teams, and then he graduated with honors from the University of Florida with a Bachelor of Science in Business Administration, majoring in management. His hobbies include boxing, fishing, tennis, golf, guitar, piano, triathlons, reading, and all things Gator sports. And he and his wife love traveling and lots of outdoor activities. He believes in lifelong learning, volunteers in his community, and says he never gets bored. I think that sounds like many of us here with Primetime Institute. That's kind of our motto here. My husband and I first met Greg at a tabling event, I believe, several years ago, and soon thereafter he contacted us about a special Social Security benefit, which we qualified for at that time. He's a Raymond James branch manager with an office in Newberry, and he partners with other professionals in our area and has offered to provide us some more programs in the future. Since Primetime is a nonprofit organization, our speakers cannot solicit their business or services. However, Greg has brought some literature and business cards, which you're welcome to take home. And we ask that you keep your questions during this program today general in nature. If you have any personal circumstances you want to discuss, please see Greg after the program. So please welcome Greg Smith. Yes.
Accept that thing about recording.
Well, see, that's not on the screen here.
Well, just press enter and see what happens.
If I click got it.
Okay. There you go.
Thank you, Marie. Can we add pickleball to that hobbies list now? Yeah. It's a fun game. So my name's Greg Smith, as Marie was saying, a certified financial planner. Been doing it for over 15 years, and we help investors build, maintain, protect, and transfer their wealth. Today we're going to talk about our 10 themes for 2024. And really, we try to keep these interactive, so if folks either online or in person have some questions, I'm happy to answer those. If I don't have the answer, I can certainly get it or try to find it. But our theme for 2024, we use markets, mild or spicy. So you have this kitchen show, kitchenware theme. And we'll talk about why we're using that, because a lot of the chefs, the best chefs, they have to be prepared, right? Sometimes things don't always go as planned, so they have to make adjustments. Same way with the financial markets. So we'll talk about that. If I can get this to work. Let's see. I might.
Make sure it's turned on.
Yeah, he had it on for me. Let me see. Let's see how that works there.
Here.
Yeah, that's on. Here, we can.
And what I'm going to do is turn this like this.
Uh-oh.
Oh, now it's a little
All right,
bit late.
And
now we're back in business.
So
then you can
maybe
face the audience
I got
more
it here. It's working now.
and
Okay.
and then you'll be able to be heard without standing up against the wall.
Okay. All right, perfect. So markets, mild or spicy, that's our 2024 theme. So we're going to talk about these 10 themes. The first one is the U.S. economy. We're calling it the rotisserie economy. Why are we calling that? Some sectors are hot, then they turn cold, and that's been happening quite a bit over the last few years. Monetary policy, that's a big key element we'll discuss. Fixed income is having a makeover. So we saw interest rates change pretty dramatically in the last few years here. We'll talk about some opportunities there. U.S. equity markets. So we're calling that the critical eye of Gordon Ramsay. The perfectionist. You have to get it just right. So we think we're in that type of market this year. Sectors. What are some of the sectors that we favor? We'll discuss that. Small capitalization companies. We'll discuss them. Opportunities there, international opportunities in that landscape, oil markets, volatility, the ups and downs, and then asset allocation. Pace yourself at the buffet, as they say on there. So first theme, first of the 10 is the economy. So we probably had the most telegraphed recession in history last year, right? That didn't actually happen, so to speak, but everybody was counting on it. It was supposed to be here. And I'll talk a little bit about where we see things going, but we'll just recap, last year and then give our outlook going in 2024. But a lot of the sectors, as we mentioned, are hot and then they're cold, they're hot and they're cold. Markets rotate, right? So that's why we're calling it the rotisserie economy. If you look at what's been going on, some of the areas with air travel spending, that's gone way up, 194%. Leisure and hospitality's up 41%. Think of that as the Taylor Swift economy, right? We're hearing all these big concerts going on, so that's your leisure and hospitality and maybe some air travel spending there. So what's some areas that have been on the cold side? So some of those would be the interest rate sensitive sectors, right? Interest rates went way up, more than they've been in decades. Existing home sales. You remember you may know somebody that they put their home on the market and just a couple years ago, year and a half ago, and they could sell it like the next day, same day. And that was happening. You're putting your home on the market, and then there's 30 bids, 40 bids, and you take a pick of who you want to sell it to. But now that's starting to change. That story's starting to shift some because rates have gone up, making it less and less affordable to buy houses. So existing home sales have actually decreased over the last 2 years. So we're seeing that have a pretty strong decrease, 44%. Manufacturing's gone down also. So you're kind of seeing some things hot, some things cold, and that's why we're calling it the rotisserie economy. Their labor market's slowing down. Some areas are starting to soften a little bit. Restaurant performance is slowing down also. So that was an area, if we think back, the COVID economy, right? We were all bottled up, and then all of a sudden things started to open back up, and then people were spending money. So discretionary spending started to go way up, and now some of that's starting to slow down. And one of the measures we look at is number 4 on their luxury watch sales, which that's actually starting to ease as well. So that's an indicator of some of that discretionary spending for the that higher net worth market. So that's starting to cool down. And then architecture billing, that's slowing also. That gives us a little bit of a window into what's going to happen next with the construction industry, so to speak. So those are some key metrics we're looking at there. And then we're in a presidential election year, right? That's a big one. I couldn't go through the 10 themes without talking about that a little bit. But we've had 3 recessions in the 4th year of a presidential term, so they have happened. So we'll talk a little bit about that. You can see the different recessions are, different years of the presidency is not uncommon. Obviously, year 1 is the most common for there to be a recession. If you think about why that is, the last party might get voted out, and the new person comes in, and they take over a mess, right? Or they take over that type of recession. So it's more common it happens in year 1, but it's second most common that it happens in year 4, like this year. All right, so what are we expecting? So we expect it to be one of the mildest recessions in history. So last year, a lot of the market was pricing in that there was going to be a recession last year. Our expectation is that it starts in the second quarter of this year, but we do expect it to be a very mild recession. RJ, Raymond James, that's our forecast, is about down 0.5% from the GDP decline. That's what we're projecting from a recession. So you can see the severe recessions, gross domestic product, the output of the economy takes a pretty big hit in some of those. And, and then we have some that are mild. We call these mild, and we expect this one to be the, least mild of any of them, or the most mild of any of the mild recessions. Soft landing, what does that mean? We heard about interest rates getting hiked, right? That's in the news a lot. Rates going up, home prices, car loans, everything's, the interest rates. So if you're someone in a lot of debt, you're probably hurting right now. People with a lot of debt, they're feeling that pain. Rates have gone up quite a bit. But the Fed's trying to orchestrate, they're trying to get in front of inflation. They're trying to cool inflation down. That's why they raise rates. They keep raising rates until people stop buying stuff, because we're a consumer-driven economy. So they raise rates. They kind of check the pulse of the economy. And then if people are still buying stuff, boats and cars, then they raise rates again, and they check the pulse again until it gets to that pulse that they're looking for. So, it seems like we're about there, what they're looking for as far as inflation cooling. 2022, Social Security raises were almost 9%. 2023 is about 3%. So, the numbers are starting to drop. And, part of that reason is why we expect this to be a mild recession here. But a couple things we're looking at, economic shocks. We're not seeing, any big economic shocks. They always say the train that hits you is not the train you see coming, right? But we don't expect any big shocks there. But if it does happen, that could cause some extra volatility that we weren't expecting. Unfortunately, I left my crystal ball back at the office. So there's always something happening in the markets, but we don't expect any big shocks. We don't expect any large job losses either. So we do expect some as we go through and progress through this year, but nothing substantial enough that we think is going to have a drastic impact on the market. Government spendings, they're spending money on the CHIPS Act, so that's a big one. What is that? $53 billion going into semiconductor manufacturing right here at home, and trying to diversify some of that. So that money's finding its way into the economy. Productivity is increasing. AI is mentioned on here, so we hear that. That's kind of one of the buzzwords, right? AI, artificial intelligence. That's changing the pace of technological change. It once was said, there was a quote, the speed of change has never been this fast, nor will it ever be this slow again. So, and I think there's a lot of truth to that. And when we see some of these things like AI getting implemented into the workplace and finding practical uses, then that's going to increase productivity. And I think technology, look at technology, it's usually overestimated in the short run, like how it's going to help us or what it's going to do. It's typically people get excited and they get overly excited about the new technology, the new shiny object, and it's overestimated in the short run, but then it's underestimated in the long run. So we think that's the AI is kind of that type of case. Is everybody jumped on board real quick, and then some of the fanfare will die down. But long term, it's going to have some big productivity increases. Household net worth, so that's at a record high right now. Second theme, monetary policy. So this is really a big one. We'll call Chairman Powell the top chef. So he's got to decide, with their other chairmen and chair people, what do they do with interest rates? How high do they go? How low do they go? Do we pause them? Do we continue to raise them? Where are we at with that? So they're trying to walk that fine line of their mandate of keeping a stable economy, and helping, with monetary policy. But when you start looking at what signs are out there that's telling us that the inflation numbers have cooled off. Now, we're never going to get back to the old prices. That's not going to happen. But are they still going to go up at 9-10% a year? We don't expect that either. So we're starting to see some things cool down. You can see TVs are down 11%. A funny story, I used to work at Sears at the Oaks Mall. I don't know if y'all remember that when they still existed there. In the electronics section, I was in, we'd sell TVs, and I remember like the new TVs came out, and they were, the top of the line ones were like $4 or $5 grand, and now I think you get the same thing for like $250. And, there's, so some things are dropping just because the economies of scale are dropping, but autos are coming down. Utility gas services coming down a little bit, although we probably don't see that quite as much in Gainesville coming down, right? But overall, nationally, it has been. Health insurance has come down also. So there's some things that we're seeing that are dropping. The one big component that really keeps some of the numbers up there is your shelter and your housing costs. So you can see that in the blue, the light blue on there, shelter consumer price index, still real high, but we can see where that's trending. And typically that kind of follows that Zillow index, home price index year over year, which that index has gone way down. So we'd expect this to follow that, and that would cool things down from an inflationary standpoint there. So how many jobs are we going to lose? Nobody really knows, right? But our estimate is about a million jobs lost. The historical average is about 3.5 million is what we typically see, during a recessionary period of time. So we think it's going to be a little less than what we've seen in the past, going forward there. Federal Reserve's mandate, they're looking at seeing inflation at 2%. That's their goal, or that's their stated goal. So a lot of folks might say, well, they're not going to cut rates until they see that. But most of the time, 8 out of the last 9 times, they cut rates before the inflation went below 2%. So, and the one time it was below, it was barely below. So even though they've said we're wanting to see inflation at 2%, that we may see a cut, we probably will see a cut before we actually get there, is our expectation. Election years have not swayed the Fed, and I think that's an important point because, it gives the appearance at least that they're not political or one side or the other, but they'll make the cuts if they feel that's necessary, because their job is to be an independent body and to keep the economy stable, keep inflation down, keep the economy from going into a severe recession. So they might make some cuts, they might make some hikes, and this just gives you the percentages of the time during election years when they've done that, when they made those rate cuts, when they made those rate hikes. And oftentimes they do that, and that has a big impact on the economy. So we think 3 to 4 cuts for 2024. We'll see for rate cuts throughout the year, and maybe we'll start seeing those mid-year or in the second quarter of this year. The consensus estimate for most economists is about 6. They're saying, so we're a little lower in the expectation. We think there'll be a few less cuts than the consensus expectation, but that's the implied trajectory, and we're starting to see the markets react to this expectation already. Even though the cuts haven't happened, there's still the reaction of the anticipation of that happening. Fixed income. So this is important. So, for more conservative investors, or somebody wants, fixed income, or they're trying to generate income in retirement, this is an important piece of the market right now. We expect rates to continue to decline as the year goes on. So we've encouraged folks to lock in rates for longer if they don't need the money right away, because we expect rates to decline, and then the opportunities aren't going to be as attractive 6 months, certainly a year from now, and certainly not 2 years from now as those rates go down. If we camp out in money market or cash, like money market rates right now, liquid next day, paying over 5%. So a lot of investors look at that and they say, well, why would I tie it up if I can have something liquid? Well, when the rates start getting cut, you're going to wish you had some money that was locked in at those higher rates while they existed. So that's the reason why. But you always need some liquid funds too. But that's what we expect on the fixed income market is those rates are going to continue to drop. And in November, it looks like that process started because they've been coming down, especially longer term rates. Short term rates still haven't come down much yet, but longer term rates have. So we're already starting to see the markets make those adjustments. So this is important if safety is a concern of yours, you know, and you like the fixed income markets rather than the equity markets. There's going to be a lot of big changes as that goes on. So let's rewind back and look at where we are at the COVID lows. You can see all the way on the left side of the screen, you know, 0.1% for, I believe that's the Treasury rates we're looking at there. Yeah, the 2-year Treasury, 0.1%. When we hit the COVID lows, I mean, you didn't get anything. You know, you're just parking it and getting it back. Now, that same, as of December at least, that was at 4.3%. That number's actually come down a little bit since then, even though we've only been a few weeks into the new year. Happy New Year, everybody, by the way. So the 10-year Treasury was at 0.5%, and at the COVID lows, and now it's at 3.9. So even a little bit lower than that. It's made some adjustments. Municipal bonds, tax equivalent yields at the highest rate, you know, went from under 1% to the tax equivalent yield of over 5%. So, I mean, that had a pretty big jump. So if you're in a high tax bracket and you're looking to keep the IRS out of your pocket, some of those opportunities look pretty attractive. So the point of that is just rates have gone way up. No matter where you look, you know, the safest of bonds, you know, with the treasuries or the municipal bonds or corporate bonds, they all have adjusted quite a bit. So, you know, the good news is income-oriented investors are getting a lot more income. The bad news is, well, inflation was up, right? So you needed that extra income to keep up with the rising cost of living. So 10-year Treasury, we expected to end at about 3.5%. Let's see here. So now investors are insulated more in fixed income because a lot of fixed income investors, conservative investors who may have owned more bonds, they were pretty disappointed in 2022 because 2022 was a tough year for bonds. It was really the second worst year for bonds in history, period. And why is that? Well, if you go back and you locked in one of those beautiful 0.5% 10-year Treasury rates at the time, and then later, you know, 2 years later, we have all this inflation kicking in, and now you want to sell a 10-year bond that's paying 0.5% when new investors can go out and get 4 on that same one? Do you think anybody's going to want your 0.5% bond? Nobody's going to want it. So they had a bad return because if you sold it early, you had to take a pretty big hit. You waited till maturity on the Treasury bond, you got what you put in back. But you saw that statement shock. You know, nobody wanted that because stocks and bonds, I mean, that's just a big auction, right? You know, you're just saying, you know, who wants to buy my 0.5% bond or who wants to buy my dividend-paying stock? And sometimes hands go up, sometimes they don't. Sometimes people show up at the auction house, sometimes they don't. But that was the environment we're in. And we're expecting that to shift, and now, you know, rates coming down, we're going to be on the opposite end of that slope. And now, all of a sudden, if you locked in 4, 5, 6% bond, and new rates are 3 or 4, and you say, "Hey, who wants this?" A lot of hands are going to go up. So we're seeing that it's just cycles. You know, it's rate hike cycles, and then we come down that cycle. So we're seeing that play out again. But now you're insulated. If we're wrong and rates increase again and nobody wants a 4% bond because they can go get 5 of a Treasury bond, your decline in value, your statement value, your maturity value is going to stay the same, right? You hold it to maturity, you get, you know, the government pays you back, you're good to go. You sell it early, you could take a hit, but now the hit you would take if we got that wrong and rates went up, it wouldn't be as much as what we saw in a 2020 year where rates were nothing. So the higher coupon insulates you a little bit better with those types of changes. So when we look at fixed income, what parts of the market make the most sense? And we heavily favor, at the top there, the investment grade bonds. So high quality stuff. We think high quality matters. especially if we're going into a mild recessionary period of time, quality is going to matter. It's when things get tight, it's like Warren Buffett always said. You ever hear the old quote? You find out who's swimming naked when the tide rolls in. Yeah. And I think the same thing when the tide rolls in, the economy, so to speak. You find out what companies are swimming naked, basically, or which ones have a lot of debt, or which ones are, kind of on the fringe there, and maybe can't survive that kind of economic impact. But a high quality company, one with a good cash position, a lot of cash, not a lot of debt, but a nice balance, they're going to weather that storm a heck of a lot better because they're in a leaner, better position there. So we say, stay away from the high yield market. Yeah, you get a little more income, but it's return of principal that matters rather than return on principal. So we think these markets are going to be stressed a little bit. 50% of the what we call junk bonds, lower grade corporate bonds, are at risk of getting a downgrade. So if we go into a recession, a lot of those could get downgraded. You don't want to hold something that's getting downgraded. That's not good news. Equity. So two ways you can invest money. You can own or you can loan. We just talked about loaning. You loan out to cities, states, governments. You get a rate and a date and a guarantee. The guarantee is only as good as guarantor. So we talked about that. Now we're talking about ownership investments. So you get absolutely no guarantee here. Owners will make more than loaners historically over longer periods of time, but they don't get a guarantee. They get more bumps in the road, right? But we'll call this the critical eye of Gordon Ramsay, right? It's got to be perfect. We need perfection in this type of market right now. So selection matters. Selectivity really matters a lot. So there's some good areas of the market. There's some not so attractive areas from valuation standpoints. We're putting a $225 S&P earnings price for the end of the year. So we think that some of those could be revised downwards, and we multiply that by what the average company's trading at right now. It gives us our S&P target for the end of the year. So what does all that mean? It just means there's not a lot of upside as a whole in the markets unless some good things start to happen. There's a little bit of upside, but you have to be very, very selective of what types of equities you're owning, and expect there to be more bumps in the road. So put on your seatbelt because we typically see about 3 to 4, 5% pullbacks each year. We'd expect that this year. Markets, typically perform pretty well after the Fed rate cuts, but the few months before the first Fed cut, which we haven't had that yet, but we expect that's coming. A few months before, a few months after, it's pretty choppy. So, there's going to be some volatility there, but markets tend to perform pretty well after that if you give it time. If you don't give it time, you could be disappointed. So those are base case scenarios. We think a little bit of upside, 3 to 4 rate cuts. A bull case scenario, if everything goes right, we think the market could really take off. Or if we have a severe recession, if the Fed gets it wrong, if they get this monetary policy wrong, they hike rates too much and, cause a severe recession, there'd be some downside in the market. But we think base case scenario, 60%, that we see that average scenario where the market goes a little bit higher this year as well. And certainly some sectors are going to perform a lot better than other sectors. So let's talk about that. So we're using the cooking theme, right? The Gordon Ramsay, Top Chef, all that good stuff. So what do they call it? The Michelin star? Is that what it is? Yeah. I don't know where the name came from, but they use that. Here's 3 sectors we like because we're talking about sectors. Now we're kind of diving into equities rather than fixed income. So we like infotech, AI, healthcare, and then industrials. So those are some of our favorite sectors going into 2024, and we'll talk about why we favor those. You can see on the left of the screen there where the current adoption rate of AI is about 40, 50 million. And we expect that number, to go up over 400 million by the end of the decade. So AI is just becoming more and more a piece of what we do, what companies are using. So we think that's a good tailwind for the tech sector. So we like that. You got 3D printing. Um, we've used it. I've actually used it for the first time. I mean, the way it prints, I mean, it's just really neat, and it's only going to get better and better. And you can pick your image. You know, you want to print out a boat for the kids. You know, and you can press print, find it, and it's, you know, do that DNA gene sequencing. I met a guy a few months back for breakfast out in Newbury, small town, little diner. Asked where his car is. He points across the street. I didn't think anything of it. But he said, yeah, it's one of the Teslas. So I said, oh, one of the self-driving Teslas, right? And has anybody ever been in one of those? No? So he said, yeah, you want to go for a ride? I said, sure. You know, I've never had an opportunity. So I'm walking over. He walks over to the passenger side, which means I'm driving, I guess. And I wasn't really ready for that. But got in, hopped in it, you know, pressed a couple buttons, and let go of the wheel for the first time in my life. Well, maybe not the first time. I drove with my knees before, but letting go of the wheel and not driving with your knees, first time in my life, and you know, it's pretty amazing how good it performed. I didn't trust it, but it did let me know, you know, that the technology's here and it's only getting better. And he told me, give it a few months, you'll trust it. So it was uncomfortable, but the technology is very good, and we expect that to continue to, you know, be adopted by Americans and throughout the world. Best margins of any sectors. All right, so the tech sector. So it's actually, if you looked at the last 20 years, or they're looking at the last 3 years actually on this, but they're going over a 20-year period of time. Technology sector, the NASDAQ, has actually underperformed the S&P, the Standard & Poor's, by about 13%, which, you know, doesn't really happen, but it has happened. So even though 2023 was a very good year for tech stocks, we still expect them to continue. And here's why. Partly because of that underperformance the last 3 years, but their earnings of tech companies has gone up, you know, 8%, whereas the stocks themselves of those companies are down, even though the earnings have gone up. So if you look at it over that period of time, the stocks are still down, even though they had a good run last year. They had a bad run the year before, but their earnings are up 8%. So we think there's some room to, you know, have them catch up in that gap. Healthcare. We love healthcare. That's a great sector. It's one of the highest inflation rate sectors that we see as well. So you want to own some of the companies that create that inflation, but there's a lot of interesting drugs coming out, you know, cancer drugs, Alzheimer's drugs, a lot of good innovation that's in that sector. And that's a sector that hasn't really moved a whole lot, but they have the strongest earnings per share growth, those stocks do, of any of the sectors in the market that you can invest into. And here's what you might like to hear, is it's one of the top returning sectors, you know, over these 5-year periods of time, but it's also been one of the least risky areas of the market. So you can own some of those types of companies that are in good cash positions, give you less risk, and, you know, most of the return, or one of the higher returns of those sectors that are mentioned there. So we all want that, right? We want the least amount of risk with the highest return, but usually there's some trade-offs in healthcare. You know, you're getting, it looks like you can get a little bit of both. Industrials, you can see that has skyrocketed. You know, some of the construction put in place in the computer, the semiconductor industries. You know, why did that happen? Hear about the CHIPS Act. You know, so they're trying to bring a lot of semiconductor manufacturing back home. I think that was $53 billion that went into that. So yeah, that's going to be a little bit of a spike. So a lot of government spending has went into that sector. We think the industrials are going to benefit, you know, from some of that. Small cap equities. So we start thinking about ownership investments, the small companies that you can own. You know, going off that food theme, you know, some of the dives can be the best, right? You ever go to that place where you get good food at some place that doesn't look like it has good food? So small cap equities, we think of that might be the dive bar of the market, or however we want to look at it. There's some values there. They've underperformed large companies by 75% over the last 7 years. So, I mean, that's a huge underperformance number over that period of time. So that could be shifting. But the attractive valuations, they're a lot cheaper than where they've been on average. Typically fall in a recession. All the way on the left there on the chart, you can see small caps, small companies have outperformed large companies getting out of the recession. Typically they outperform too the S&P after making those first rate cuts. So we should expect to see that this year as well. So we think that's a good area of the market where there's some opportunity as well. But certainly small companies, there's more risk, right? The smaller the company, the more risk you're taking on, because it doesn't take quite as much to move them. And if you think about that, if you take the Russell 2000 and you add up all those companies together, every single one of them in that index, they're not even as big as Apple. They're not as big as Microsoft. So all those companies in that index, you add them up, they're not as big as some of these large cap behemoth companies that we think of, like the Apples and the Microsofts of the world. So it's not going to take much to move that needle like it would an Apple or a Microsoft. So if money does start flowing into those areas, you could see some good traction there and some good gains. We got to talk about international equities. So the U.S. is still grade A, prime stake, right? We still favor the U.S. markets, and we'll talk about a couple reasons why. But we're seeing a lot of shifts internationally, and we do see some opportunities internationally as well. But when you look at the G7 countries, the U.S. market performance over the last 10 years has been 121% more than these other countries you see listed on here. That's almost a 7% annualized difference above the return you would have gotten if you invested in some of these other G7 markets there. So I mean, that's huge. So we still favor the U.S. And there's some reasons why, but the U.S. really has the biggest and best businesses in the world, and they get a lot of revenue from overseas anyways. So it's not, you could own, like, take for instance as an example, Coca-Cola, and they're a Atlanta-based company, but 80% of their revenue is coming from overseas. So it's a U.S. company, but they're getting a lot of revenue internationally. But U.S. stocks are having a pretty significant outperformance there. And here's why. This tells you the story. GDP growth, how's the economy doing? Ours has outpaced all these other ones listed here on the G7. Earnings growth, second best there, right there with Italy. Italy had a pretty rough year before. Net margins are good, dividend growth, and if you take all the composites of those numbers versus some of these international developed markets, we look pretty good. And these are some other reasons here. So stronger U.S. growth in 2024 is the expectation there versus these other G7 countries. The consumer is more resilient here. Over 70% of our economy is consumer driven. How much are we spending as a whole? We're a consumer spending economy. When people stop spending, things start to slow down. We look a lot better than a lot of these other G7 countries right now by a pretty wide margin. And we talked about the three sectors that we really like this year, that we're overweight: infotech, healthcare, and industrials. And if you look at the U.S. composition of our economy here, that makes up a much bigger part of the economy than the other G7 countries. So we have more of the opportunities in those three sectors that we favor here at home. So I think that brings some comfort also. So where do you go in the international markets? And really, everybody's different, right? Everybody has different goals, different comfort levels, different level of risk. I have some 90-year-old widows trying to protect every last penny. I have 30-year-olds trying to hit home runs, and then I have some 90-year-old widows trying to hit home runs too, and 30-year-olds trying to drive slow and steady. So everybody's different, right? But a higher risk category would be emerging markets, but they typically, from an opportunity standpoint, you know, and knowing you're assuming more risk if you hop into this category, but emerging markets typically perform very well after those first Fed cuts, those rate cuts. They've done very well. And here's an interesting thing. So China's in the news a lot, right? I think the sentiment towards China is probably about as bad as it's ever been, maybe right now. So the pessimism's kind of been priced into the market. So we think it's not we don't like China. We just think with all the pessimism and it's a very different system, and there's a lot of tension there, with China and Taiwan, and then with the rest of the world. So we think there's some opportunity there. So don't get me wrong on that. But what we're seeing is some of our imports getting shifted to other countries to diversify our risk of our infrastructure, where we're getting products from. And your Mexico, your India, even Vietnam, you can see those numbers are going up. That share of the U.S. imports has actually gone up quite a bit, whereas China's share of U.S. imports is going down. It's still a big piece of the pie, but it's shifted in that direction. Energy, so we'll just kind of touch on this real quick here. We think, energy prices end a little higher to end the year. OPEC's made some cuts, but the U.S. has actually increased production a little bit to offset for that. So we think, prices will still continue to climb a little, not a lot. It's a sector that's real good on free cash flow. So the companies, if you start looking at your Exxons, your BP, the oil companies, they have really good free cash flow. So what can they do with that free cash flow? Let's say you're running a company, you're the CEO, and you have all this extra cash flow. So now you can either, buy back shares, you can pay higher dividends, or you can reinvest for the future. So you have all these options, as an energy company CEO, of what you can do with that free cash flow. So we like that part of the sector. There's been a lot of money that's gone out of energy companies this last year, so there's some opportunity there. Volatility, bumps in the road, turning up the heat. Use another kitchen theme there. There's over 40 key elections around the world, so that's certainly going to give us some bumps in the road going forward. There was a couple things. There were some positive surprises though last year. So there was a lot of expectations that we'd have the mild recession last year, right? We always called it the most telegraphed recession in the history of this country, because everybody was saying recession, and it didn't happen. We didn't have a recession last year. Actually, in fact, growth accelerated some. And the market was pricing in inflation to be higher. So if you think back to 2023, it's like, when is this ever going to end, right? Things just kept getting higher and higher. But inflation's come down some, and we're never going to get back to those old prices, though. That's not happening. But the rate of change has decelerated and slowed down. So, your Social Security check, you got almost a 9% raise in 2022. You got a 3% raise in 2023, right? So you're starting to see that decelerate, and that's directly correlated to inflation. Negative year for the market. It was pricing in that the market would be down last year. S&P was up over 25% last year, led by some of the cyclical sectors. GDP, the expectation was it declines. It actually was positive to a new record high. The Ukraine war with Russia, it looked like that would lead to higher oil prices, but oil prices were actually down 10% for the year, and that war's still ongoing. The economy, so they're pricing in, our expectation is not that there's a soft landing, but we have a mild recession this year. Starts the second quarter. That's what we feel. It's not going to be a big one, but we expect it to happen. Markets are pricing in 6 rate cuts. We're thinking 3 to 4 is our take, and then more to come next year, certainly. Equity markets, just a little bit of upside from where they're at right now. So selectivity really matters. So if you look at the market as a whole, there might not be a lot of opportunity there, but when you start to dissect it and you look within it, there's certainly some areas that we think have some really good upside. And and we have a lower target to end the year than what the consensus estimates are. And in fact, we expect oil prices to rise a little bit. So volatility, so the bumps in the road, right? So everybody would you rather have a 8% return or a 7%? You know, everybody'd probably say 8, right? But if you said 7 with half the risk, you know, then you might have a different story or a different survey take. But volatility is that measure of risk, you know, and right now we're seeing geopolitical risk with all those elections around the world, us being an election year, you know, geopolitical risk has risen to a pretty high level. So we expect it to be a bumpy ride. Like I said, fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpier ride this year, but the markets are always bumpy. Make sure you're taking an appropriate amount of risk. This gives you an idea of equity volatility increases during presidential election years. So the blue line, the light blue, is all other years, the average. And then the dark blue are during the election years, those months during election years. So you can see October, November, you know, that's when our elections are, right, November. So the volatility really spikes up. But it's certainly going to be a bumpier ride than what we usually see. And the last theme there is asset allocation. So don't go overboard at the buffet like I do. But you want to make sure you have a well-positioned portfolio. And I like to use this analogy. Anybody a golfer in here? Or no golfers? One? No? Two? All right. So it's like a straight shot down the middle. If you're a golfer, that's what you want. And that's really what the blended portfolio is meant to do, is give you that straight shot down the middle. You're never too far on the left or the right. You'll never be at the top. You're never going to be at the bottom. But it'll give you a much smoother ride. And in this example, it's a 60-40, 60% ownership, 40% fixed. There's certainly lower risk categories, but that's what we call a moderate portfolio. And that's been kind of that straight shot right down the middle. You're never at the top, you're never at the bottom. You know, because you could go into real estate and one year it's at the bottom, next year it's at the very top. You know, that's a bumpy ride. You know, or individual, you know, large cap stocks or small cap stocks, international stocks. I mean, if we graph any of those out, you know, it's just kind of all over the place. But having that diversification really helps protect against those bumps in the road and create some opportunities. All right. So what would you think? So we looked at a couple different strategies. If you got the Barron's newspaper article, you know, every year, you know, January 1st, and it told you what was the best performer last year, and you put all your money into that, you said, all right, I'm going to ride the wave. What do you think that might have done? You think that's a smart strategy, good one, bad one? So, and then we looked at if you put all your money into the worst performer of the prior year, and then just having a blended portfolio and sticking, you know, with your allocation model. So you can see all the way on the left there, prior year's best. You get that Barron's magazine, you read it, and you say, gosh, that was the best performer last year. I'm putting all the chips in on red. You know, you were down 4.9% over that period. So you're looking over an 18-year period of time. You actually lost money on average year after year after year by saying, and then you're scratching your head trying to figure out, you know, hey, I was looking at what was doing good, you know, but that's like driving down the interstate looking in your rearview mirror, right? You know, markets are more like hockey. You want to go where the puck's going, not necessarily where the puck's been. So that's rearview mirror driving. Last year's worst performers, putting your money in, fared a lot better, but still not the best. Blended portfolio, 6.2%. And when you think about that, we're throwing in the Great Recession, right? The 2008 recession, one of the worst financial crises in 3 generations. You know, since the movie, what was it, It's a Wonderful Life? Anybody see that old Christmas movie? You know, since it really, that was like the worst financial crisis, you know, since the Great Depression, for the most part. That's included in this number. So you still came out. You throw that in there, and all those years, and it still looks, you know, pretty attractive. But your $100,000 in this case, grew to almost 3 times what you started with over those 18 years, versus investing in the last year's biggest loser, you went up a little bit. If you go into last year's biggest winner every year, you took 100,000, you turned it into 40,000. That probably doesn't feel very good. But that's what that strategy would have done. Always rear view mirror driving. You don't want to do that.
Can I ask something, or we have to wait?
Yeah,
It's okay.
yeah, we can.
When you talk about rear view, and you're talking about 1 year, I
Mhm.
mean, nobody would go over 1 year, I would think, but there is some benefit to be gained if you're looking at, a 10-year performance record, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great question. To repeat the question for those online. So, rear view mirror driving. Are we looking at if we're not necessarily looking at a 1 year versus a longer term time frame? How does that impact that type of philosophy? And really, this is looking at here if every year you're going back and you're looking and you're replacing your investments with last year's biggest winner, it's not necessarily good. If you did it over 10 years, if you looked at who was your best winner over 10 years, you probably have a lot more. I don't have the data on that other than long-term returns look attractive, and typically the more risk you take, the more your return is going to be. Otherwise, nobody would take that risk. But yeah, if you looked over a 10-year period of time versus a 1 year, and you backwards rear view mirror drive, that would probably be a lot better, because now you're looking at a big slice of the market. So yeah, 1 year is just too short term. I mean, if somebody comes to me and they say, yeah, I'm okay with a lot of risk. Let's drive it really fast, and I'm going to need the money in 6 months. It's probably not a good idea. So we always want to see investors, really want to have that longer term time frame. So 1 year, you're right, is not really a good number to look at there. No.
This is an 18-year.
Yeah. So the question, this is 18 years here. Yeah. And they're looking at, though, during those 18 years, every year we reevaluate our portfolio and we say what did good last year, and we're moving. In this example on the bottom, the worst performing one, we're putting all our money into who did the best last year every year for 18 years. Versus up here, you're just staying the course and you're sticking with that allocation model.
I have a question from online.
Yeah.
Should you change all or most of your investments each year? Can't you just let it ride for years?
Yeah, great question. You want me to repeat the question too,
Yes.
right? Okay. So should you change your investments each year, or can't you just let it ride, longer term? And I'd say you want to. The benefits of rebalancing are important too, especially if risk is important for somebody, is to keep that risk level down. Rebalancing helps achieve that, because if you let the portfolio drift for too long, let's say you had 50% of your account in ownership investments and 50% of it in loan investments, fixed income. Well, ownership investments typically perform much better than loan and fixed income investments. So if you let it sit for too long, all of a sudden that 50-50 mix, might not change a whole lot in 1 year, but in 10 years, in 20 years, now all of a sudden you might have a 70-30 portfolio, and as you age, your equities are now 70% of what you have. At a time when you want to take less risk, you're actually taking more risk because you haven't made some of those adjustments. So we do feel that at least each year it's important to evaluate the performance of your individual components of your portfolio and set up investment policy and set some parameters. Not try to predict, but take advantage of whatever happens, but to keep that same allocation model, keep that same level of risk as time goes on. And we have to evaluate it from time to time to be able to do that.
The investments we have automatically readjust to the balance of different things that, 40% this, 60% that.
Mhm.
And if it gets out of whack, it's automatically adjusted.
Okay, so the statement made online is that this portfolio that we're discussing specifically is automatically making adjustments to keep those same thresholds. And I would say in that case, if that's happening, then that's good. That would keep that risk level right where you want it. So I think that would accomplish that in that type of investment management platform that you're in. That sounds like to me like it's achieving what we would recommend. From a risk standpoint, maintaining that level of risk. And sir, you got a question?
I was just wanting to add the three categories that you mentioned: info, health,
Mhm.
and industry.
Mhm.
And my strategy has been that I would take those three categories, the companies or the investments in those three categories.
Mhm.
And after 5 years, I would pick the top performing investment companies for those three areas.
Mhm.
And every 5 years, I would go in and evaluate them. The first 5 years, I would pick the top performers in this out of those three categories.
Mhm.
The next 5 years, that would be 10 years of investment. Those that are still doing good, keep them.
Mhm.
Those that are not performing, I would make some shifts. But when I reach my retirement or 30 years, I am going to have lessened my investment
Mhm.
to the point where I'm not risking anything. I'm in a stable because I need my money.
Mhm.
I'm retired.
Yeah.
So I wanna risk early. Go out and play the field early because I have time.
Mhm.
As time go on, I'm going to start limiting how much I risk, how many companies I kind of like throw my money at.
Mhm.
But as I reach retirement, I start investing in stable fixed income returns.
Mhm.
That's my strategy.
Yeah.
And it works for me. I don't know about other people, but it works for me.
Yeah. No, the very good point. And as you age, you're getting more conservative
There
with the
you go.
portfolio. Yeah.
There you go.
So the statements and the comments for those online was geared towards decreasing the level of risk in retirement as you age and adding more to fixed income, which we think that's a good idea. Yeah, it protects you more, so it gives you a little less upside, but it protects you more, as that time frame shortens,
Exactly.
which we think is important. So you in retirement, here's the number I know: a 65-year-old couple comes to me today, married couple, one of them's going to make it to 92, usually the women, but people who are educated or married, there's certain factors that life expectancies, start to go out further and further. So when you get to retirement, there still could be a long window, that you want the money to last. You want to be able to keep up with inflation. So we still feel there should be some balance there, but everybody's goals are different. So it's, depending on where you're at that point, where you want to go, what's your goals for retirement, what's your comfort level. Because if you're not comfortable driving it faster and you go through a market like 2022 or 2008, and you're way down and you start to abandon your plan and you throw up the white flag and you get out, that's not good news, because you only get one shot at retirement. And that's it. One shot. We've seen, in my 15 and a half years of doing this, we've seen hundreds of people retire. So we see some of the pitfalls and some of the things, but the reality is you get one shot, so you got to make it count, and you want to make sure you have a good plan in place that is going to keep you comfortable. You don't want to lose sleep at night. It's just not worth it. If you make another 0.5% and you're losing sleep,
What good is it?
yeah, what good is that, right? So,
When this lady says that hers automatically adjusts,
mhm.
she's talking about having either a fund manager or financial something that's doing that for her. right? Somebody's looking at that and making those adjustments.
It sounds like, so the question,
Whereas he's doing everything himself.
so it sounds like your question, just to repeat for the online folks, it sounds like for the earlier question from the online person, that either they're working with the financial advisor or they have some kind of program that's
Not the online person. This lady said hers
Yeah,
automatically adjust.
The second response was from me, not from somebody.
oh, I got you. Okay. I thought you were the conduit for the
Well,
online.
that too, but.
All right. Yeah. Yeah. No. So that's good. Yeah. So yeah, that can do that. There's certain things. There's certain types of investments. There's like target date retirement funds that may adjust. There's stuff that's on a sliding scale that gets more conservative as you get closer to retirement. So like a lot of mutual fund companies, they've come out with products that get more conservative as you age. They've come out with products that are tailored to your risk comfort level. So some of those will make those adjustments for you, and they're on kind of a autopilot, set it and forget it type of path. And then a lot of folks, work with advisors making those adjustments, based on where they see value in the market. So there's different ways to do it. There's different products that can accomplish those goals. Some certainly we favor more than others, but there's so many different opportunities. If somebody wants a portfolio to automatically make those adjustments, they can find a way to do that. And I'm going to talk about the last theme here. Just be cautious. You can see money coming in. We were talking about rear view mirror driving. That's our mentality as human beings, is to do what feels good today, right? So, but you really need to look forward. Where's the puck going? Not where's it at, not where has it been. But you can see right here, there's been just a huge inflow of cash to the S&P, SPY specifically. They're looking at as a index, index fund that represents the market as a whole. It's been a lot of money's flowed into it here recently, but I would just say you want to be cautious. Oh, it's cutting us off on this, so I don't know if they can see that online or not.
Yes.
Can they? Okay, good. So the average returns, can be negative many times after that happens. There's a few exceptions there. If you look at the top 10 averages, you look at the top 20 averages, you've had a couple times where it's had some positive returns going forward. But we just say be cautious. That's all. When you look at all that money that's flown into there, be cautious going forward. And to close this out here, there's a couple quotes. Finding the right balance, the first one. Tell me what you eat, and I'll tell you what you are. That you can relate to the portfolio. If you're a growth investor, you might have a lot of AI or high-flying stocks. If you're a conservative investor and you don't want to feel many bumps in the road, you might own more of the fixed income. Chefs don't make mistakes. They make new dishes. You don't want to panic. Make adjustments, because everything's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be always how we laid it out or some analyst predicted. And, it's like they said, what was the quote? Economic analysts predict the last 20 out of the last 10 recessions or something like that. So nobody has a crystal ball, but you want to look where the value is, where some of those opportunities are, and make adjustments, because things happen. Like I said earlier, it's not the train you see coming that hits you, it's the train you don't see. And that's been going on throughout the history of the world. There's tech bubbles, terrorist attacks, world recessions, Great Depressions, Iraq, Afghanistan, Vietnam, Korea. There's always something. There's inflation, high unemployment, different things going on that we have to watch out for. If you want to become a great chef, you have to work with great chefs. That's exactly what I did. That was a Gordon Ramsay quote. So I guess he's talking about trust your sous chef or your advisor in this analogy there. But those are just some good quotes to relate it back to the restaurant theme, the Top Chef theme. So we didn't do this presentation for y'all the group last year, but we always give ourselves a scorecard. We grade ourselves though. But we got most things right last year when we looked at the 2023 themes. We felt like we did a pretty good job with that. So we always kind of look back and just like you would with your portfolio, you want to look back, see what you do right, what you get wrong. Even the best batters are not going to bat 100, right? So you have to make adjustments. Things happen from time to time. But that's really it with the prepared content. I don't know how we're doing on time, but
I just want to mention
Yeah.
that although some of these slides are hard to read here, once the Senior Center processes the recording from today's program, if you're on our email list, it'll be shared on Sunday or as soon as we have it.
Marie just shared with us for the online viewers
Well, the
that.
online viewers can see it really well.
They can see it well.
Okay.
Right, but it's
Disregard.
only- It's being recorded,
Yeah.
so there'll be a recording
The-
that can be watched later.
They'll have it. Okay, that'll be sent out. Okay, perfect. Yes, a question back there. Hey, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
Hey, been good. Been a long time.
I'm not quite 90, but I'm like that conservative widow.
Yeah.
Still working and just have been saving money.
Mhm.
I have taken advantage of the higher CD rates in the past year.
Mhm.
But I'm being encouraged by the financial person at my credit union to invest a lot in two annuities. I haven't heard you talk about annuities.
Mhm.
Strategy he is expressing is to take advantage of the high fixed interest rates and
Mhm.
lock them in for 5 to 6 years.
Great question and point. So for the online viewers, there's really one of the attendees live here had mentioned that she's taking advantage of some of the high CD rates right now. The financial representative at the bank or credit union
Credit union.
at the credit union is encouraging her to lock in fixed annuity rates for 5 or 6 years to take advantage of rates while they're high. So that was the statement. And I would say, because I didn't mention annuities during this presentation, that can be a whole presentation all by itself. There's a lot of different makes and models. Certainly, just coming from what I've seen in my conversations with clients, especially this year, it's really heightened and it's gone up, is to lock in. If the money's going to sit there for a while, start locking in some of those rates. So I think your financial person is right in that sense that they're seeing some of the same things we're talking about today. We're expecting rate cuts, and the market's already starting to adjust. So, ever since November, there's been a sense of urgency from my point of view to make sure that, hey, we've had these conversations, and now we're starting to see it play out. I know I told you for a year and a half, but it's here finally. But it's been a long time coming, and we were in the up rate part of the cycle, just cycles. Fed was raising rates went way up. Next move looks like they're probably coming down. So, so I would encourage folks, everybody's situation different. So this is more general commentary, but to lock in rates for money that you can, I think that's a huge advantage, and you're going to be rewarded quite a bit. Bonds typically perform very, very well when rates are coming down, because now if you locked in a 5-6% bond and rates are coming down, new investors only get 3%, everybody wants your 6%. Everybody. And the same thing, you mentioned the annuities, so those rates, I'm starting to see those coming down right now. So I think if you're looking at that and you're thinking about it, you want to take action probably pretty soon. If you do it 6 months from now, you're gonna be a little disappointed you didn't do it sooner. You do it a year from now.
Recommending immediate action.
Yeah, and I would say there is a sense of urgency there, and it's not. And there's good reason. It sounds like he's telling you that, but yeah, if you're considering it, you really should, make a decision on, or like at least have a conversation and look at that, because the rates, we're watching them in real time dropping. When I have the conversation with somebody, if they haven't decided, I tell them like, hey, you call me a week from now, 2 weeks, it might be lower, and I'm not trying to pressure them into it. It's just that's the reality of it, and we're watching that happen since November, and we expect that trend to continue. So, yeah. Question back here.
When my father-in-law, former father-in-law, died, he was a World War II veteran, and he had in that fall, the state comes in, sends a social worker, they deem him incompetent,
Mhm.
and they pretty much take over his estate, dwindle down everything up until he's in a nursing home, and well, that was a big thing. But you hear all the time in the commercial with Zinnia Health how as seniors there are ways to dwindle down your assets so that big government with their overreach everything doesn't come in and basically take everything that you've been working for and storing away.
Mhm.
So my concern with investments is, once you lock in an investment and send your money under your name, don't they, if we did fall into a recession, something went haywire, couldn't they systematically, as they always have done, figure out a way to take over?
Yeah.
Into your accounts or whatever.
Yeah, great question, and the repeat question for the online viewers. She had one of the participants here had did you say it was your father-in-law? Okay, World War II veteran. They depleted his assets, made him spend that down as, what's that?
Who's they?
So I'd say that,
Whoever the social worker he was in upstate New York City, and at the time they basically, my husband had to go up there with the legal battle, but
yeah,
so there was pretty much nothing left.
okay. And then he needed care, it sounds like. So as he needed care, they spent down all the assets that he had saved up. Okay, so really what that is, it sounds like to me is that's a Medicaid spend down story. So they'll look at, and it's tough because you work your whole life and you do the right things, and you listen to people like me or Dave Ramsey or whoever, maybe not Gordon Ramsay, we're talking about him, but you're accumulating, you're building up this nest egg, and now you're a target, right? Not for lawsuits if you get in a wreck, for spend down if you need long-term care at the end of life, which 70% of us, 7 out of 10 of us in this room is gonna need that at some point. It's very expensive. I mean, skilled care, you're talking, 6 figures. Even in Florida, Florida's one of the cheaper states. Assisted living's less, home care is less, but skilled care gets really high up there. So you could work real hard and diligently, save all this money up, and then bam, it's gone. They make you spend it down. I remember a story. Father and mother give the daughter a property, and they go build a house on the beach, and they move away. Mother has an accident like 4 years later, hits her head, then starts getting dementia. It gets worse and worse, and he's in bad shape. He's old Marine, having his own problems, so he can't really take care of her at this point. So they need skilled care, and they go back and they say, hey, 4 years ago, because the look back period's 5 years right now. That's the current law. Somebody needs skilled care, they can look back up to 5 years, say, okay, what did you transfer? What assets did you transfer in the last 5 years? You're disqualified for that value of that amount of time or what that transfer was. So they looked back and they said, no, wait a second, you gave this house to your daughter, and now you're ineligible for care for, I think it was like 10 months or something. So they had to pay out of pocket, and all their money was in their house basically, and it just made it a challenge.
Yeah.
In that example where they didn't expect that, but because that asset transfer was in that window, they're ineligible for care. They got it later, but they weren't able to get it for those 10 months or so in the beginning. Now, if you have assets in the States, then you go in and you got legacy goals. You want to give it to the kids or whoever. charity, whatever, and then you need skilled care. You put in the application. You say this is how much I'm worth, and they say, well, you're going to have to spend all that down before we'll pick up the tab. And it can run through all those savings quick. Takes you a lifetime to save it up. Maybe not as fast as the lottery winners and the NFL players spend it all, but you can go through it. You can go through it real quick if you need skilled care. I've seen it happen. That's why I think it's important. I have those conversations with clients as we look at the big picture plan, not just saving and investing. I mean, that's like the ticket into the industry is you have to be able to do that part, right? Or we shouldn't even be here. Or we shouldn't be in business. But that's why I'm a certified financial planner. We focus on the planning side, skilled care, long-term care, estate planning strategies, tax planning strategies, keeping the IRS out of your pocket. Like you want to look at all that stuff together because it all has an impact, and you can save and save and save, and then it's gone if you don't protect it. And I've seen it. We had somebody pass away last year. He needed skilled care for like 15 years. Good health. If you get Alzheimer's or something similar, you can be in great health and need skilled care for a long time, over a decade. So we saw that, and that just depleted and just went on and on. And there's ways to protect against it, but you need to do it sooner rather than later to make it effective. We got another question.
One personal
Yeah.
comment. I have encouraged my kids to get long-term care insurance now.
Mm-hmm.
I got it when I was 50, and I'm very glad.
Yeah.
It was, I worked at the university, and they offered it then, and I got it then, and I'm very glad I did. Because as you get older, that becomes a lot more expensive.
Oh yeah.
Secondly, there is one online here. I have an IRA that I want to leave to my son. Is it better to leave it to my spouse and then gift it to son, or just leave it to son?
Okay, so the question, to repeat, is that I have an IRA and I want to gift it to my son, is what I'm hearing. Should I gift it to
I
him?
want to leave it to my son.
Leave it to, she wants to,
Have him end up with it.
yeah, have the son end up with it. So should she make the beneficiary her spouse and then have him leave it to son afterwards, or make the son the beneficiary? And I'd say if you want to make sure the son gets it, you make him the beneficiary of it. Spouses have certain rights on IRAs. And I'd say this is a strategic, tactical conversation that we'd always want to look at, is what's the most efficient way to gift funds? Like if she has, to the person online who's asking this, if you had, taxable accounts and you had IRA accounts, Roth IRAs, after tax, there may be a more efficient way to leave. If you have a certain dollar amount you want to leave your son, there may be a better type of account to leave to him, or an amount from that, versus the IRA. Because if the IRA goes to the husband, he can treat it as his own and not be forced to withdraw all the funds within 10 years. There's been some new legislation passed a couple years back, and if you name the son as the beneficiary, they may be forced to draw down on that account over a short period of time. That could put them in a higher tax bracket. So it may not be the most effective legacy planning option, but I don't know the whole picture. So if that's all you have, if it's just an IRA and that's everything, then you just have to name the son and name him for you. You could do partial beneficiaries too. If you want the whole thing to go to the son, you just put him on as 100%. That way he gets it all. Because if you name the spouse, you pass away, the spouse receives it. It's the spouse's IRA. They can change if they don't like the son as much as you do. They might change that beneficiary, and that can happen. And that's because it's treated as their own. So I'd say name them directly in that case without having all the information. There may be more effective ways to do it from a tax perspective, but if assuming it's just an IRA, you just name them directly. Yeah, question.
I've invested with the same fund company, I don't even know what you call them, since 1991.
Oh, okay.
And I've done it myself.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of questions on here to do with, like I'm put a note here, can I even get long-term care insurance at my age? stuff under retirement planning, tax planning. I have questions about that.
Mhm.
To consult with someone like you, do you have to do you have to manage some of my money? I would have to move it, or how are you paid?
Yeah, good question. So the question for the online viewers is how is someone like me paid? We're paid. We do offer consultation version. If somebody wants to just engage with us on a like an hourly basis, we can do that. Typically, most of our business, most of our clients do consolidate and have us manage funds because we're looking at everything, big picture and all. But we don't have to do that. I think me personally, I'm kind of at that state. I've been doing it 15 years. So I don't really manage pieces so much. Not that we can't, but we do have another advisor in the office who could. But no, we don't. To answer the question, which was, do we have to manage the accounts? Not necessarily. So we can have consultations on, skilled care independently if that's like all you're looking to discuss. Yeah. So if that was something though, we can discuss the things that are important to you, and it's a free consultation to see if we can help. Maybe we can, maybe we can't. But that way we look at the big picture of everything, and really as a certified planner, I kind of need to know all the information, to look at the big picture to help people the best I can. That doesn't necessarily mean we have to manage that, but it means we need to know about it. Otherwise, our advice is, the output's only as good as the input. What information are we given? And the more transparent people are with us, the better we're going to be able to help them out. Because there may be some other things they can use that would better their situation.
Tell me what you eat, and I'll tell you who you are.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah. I eat everything, so. Yeah, question back here.
A quick one for me. Beautiful presentation. I'm really, amazed what you can offer.
Yeah.
You give me sleepless night.
Yeah.
I'm really scared.
Thank you. Your check's in the mail.
So what does that mean really? Not insured securities are not insured or not guaranteed by the financial institution. That is a little scary for me.
Yeah.
So tell me more about that in a quick explanation.
Yeah, no, great question. So to repeat the question for the online viewers, what is not insured by, I guess it might have been FDIC insurance that mentioned on there. So different investments. So the question was about, what does not being insured mean for some of these securities? And different types of securities have different levels of guarantee. Like you have the two ways you can invest money. There's many, many subcategories of it, but essentially it breaks down to two. You can own or you can loan. Now, if you own, you get no guarantee. You get absolutely no guarantee. You could own a piece of a company, they do well, you do well, they don't, you don't. Owners typically make more than loaners, but over longer periods of time, and they get no guarantee, so it's a bumpier ride. Loaners, you get a guarantee. Because you're a creditor, you lend out some money. Your guarantee is only as good as your guarantor. Who'd you lend it to? Let's say you lend it to the U.S. government. U.S. government backs, that's what we call risk-free investing. Something happens to the U.S. government, we got a lot worse problems to worry about. Then my recommendation is buy barbed wire and shotguns and protect your property. But if you get like an FDIC insured guarantee, that's if the bank goes under, FDIC insurance will pick up the tab. Raymond James, all financial companies have to have what's called Securities Investors Protection Corporation. That insures $500,000 of value, and then we reinsure with Lloyd's of London on top of that, aggregate of billions and billions of dollars. But all financial firms, they have that certain amount. But if somebody has $250,000 in cash at a bank, it's insured. If they have $500,000 in cash at a bank goes under, you're only covered for $250,000. So sometimes it's good to spread that out. Like we partner, because we use cash programs. We have an enhanced savings program that's paying 5% liquid, next day, FDIC insured guaranteed, for up to like $50 million. So we partner with 3,000 different banks that if somebody makes a large deposit and they want to make sure it's all insured, the cash is insured. CDs have the FDIC insurance, but up to those limits. Securities, stocks don't have any insurance. You're an owner. You own it's like owning a business. You go, any business owners in here previously? So you go out there and you start a business, there's no guarantee you're going to make it. Many of the businesses fail. So that's a security is like an ownership piece in the business. So it depends on what types of investments that you engage with us with as to what type of guarantee you're going to get. Because you may say, I want the absolute most ironclad guarantee there is, and we can do that. It comes at a cost, right? It means you're going to get less return most likely, but you're going to be able to sleep better at night. So the faster you drive your investments, the more money you can potentially make, the bumpier that ride is going to be. And
First, I want to say thank you, Greg, for a wonderful presentation.
thank you.
And it's up to you whether you have the time to stick around for any more questions. I do want to say the Senior Center provided some refreshments today, so please help yourself if you haven't already.
And I'll stick around. I think I got to be in Newberry at 5 for an appointment, or 5:15, so I'm here for a bit. But we have in those packets, if anybody would like, I've agreed we ordered some more of our investment strategy quarterly. I don't have them in the packets because we ran out, so we ordered more for the group. And then we have an award-winning magazine that's called Worthwhile. It talks about a lot of travel, leisure, market commentary. If y'all like any of those copies, feel free. There's an evaluation in those packets. You can just write that on there, and I'll be happy to mail you out a copy. Or email you. We have an email version as well, too. So either one. So, and I'll stick around for questions if anybody has.
Before you get into
Yeah. Yeah.
okay, after what happened to my father-in-law,
Yeah.
I personally did not have a lot of faith in investment because of, and especially nowadays, it just seems like we just got a whole Fed letter. It just seems like the government is constantly, stretching the line as to how far they can go into someone's lives and your financial.
Yeah. They're definitely reaching
And
out.
it's scary. And I find it.
Not getting any better, yeah.
No, it's not. So, with that said, we were thinking of an IRA ourselves.
Mhm.
However, if we had an IRA, we only have one just child, one child.
Okay.
So it's easier as far as passing assets and all that.
Yeah.
It comes up.
Just the one. Yeah.
However, my husband is 12 years older than I am.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So because he's 12 years older and his mother had dementia, his father's had Alzheimer's.
Okay.
And he sometimes starts forgetting things.
Mm-hmm.
I worry too because there's that age gap. And as much as I plan to take care of myself until I can,
Yeah.
I'm tiny. He's not that tiny.
Yeah.
And so I may not be able to properly care for him even if I wanted to
Okay.
the whole time because I might not be physically capable.
Okay. Yeah.
So if something were to happen to my husband, I would not want the government to do what to us what they did to
Yeah.
Zach.
They do the same thing. Yeah. They let the spouse, the surviving spouse, or not surviving, but just stay-at-home spouse, keep a certain amount of assets. I want to say it's 100, something like that. They may raise it a little bit. Thank you. And they'd let you keep that, but everything else, they'd have to get spent down. And it would spend down real quick if you're talking 6 figures. So how old is your husband?
He's going to be 70 this year.
Okay, there's still some options for him. Yeah, it might be worth